All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are turning back the clock. I mean, way back, to get our heads around a calendar that pretty much shaped the entire Western world for over 1,500 years. And get this, it was so influential that parts of it are still being used right now. So, what if your calendar was a political weapon? I mean, seriously, let's dive right into that, because before Julius Caesar came along, that's exactly what the Roman calendar was. It wasn't just, a simple tool to track the seasons. Nope, it was a tool for power. So, to really get why a brand new calendar was so desperately needed, we've got to take a look at the absolute mess of a system that it replaced. It was chaotic, to say the least. Okay, so the heart of the problem was, well, just bad math. The old Roman calendar was based on the moon, right? And it only had 355 days. The solar year, the time it takes the Earth to go around the sun, is about 365 and a quarter days. So you see the problem? That's a full 10-day gap every single year. Right from the get-go, the calendar was just falling further and further behind the seasons. But it wasn't just about being inaccurate. The system was wide open for abuse. See, to try and fix the seasonal drift, the high priest could add in an extra month, called Mercedonius. But here's the kicker. When they added it was totally up to them. So if they wanted an official they didn't like out of office sooner, easy, just skip the extra month that year. Wanted to keep an ally in power a little longer to push through some laws? Boom, just tack on that extra month. Time itself was literally a political weapon. So you can imagine what happened. All this constant meddling, plus the calendar's built-in flaws, just threw everything completely off the rails. By the time Julius Caesar was on the scene, the official date was a staggering 3 months out of sync with the actual seasons. 3 whole months! And that disconnect, it created some serious real-world chaos. I mean, just picture it. You're trying to celebrate a harvest festival, but there's snow on the ground. Or you're planting seeds in the scorching heat of what should be late summer. For a society like Rome, which lived and died by agriculture, having a calendar that was basically meaningless was a total disaster. Okay, so clearly something had to be done. And this is where Julius Caesar steps in. He got some advice from a brilliant astronomer, a guy named Sosigenes of Alexandria, and together they came up with this radical, super ambitious plan to finally tame time. Now, to fix the calendar, Caesar had to do something pretty drastic. He basically had to create the longest year in human history. He took the year 46 BC and just stuffed 2 extra months into it, stretching it out to an incredible 445 days. They called it the last year of confusion, and for good reason. It was this one-time, painful reset, like hitting a giant Control-Alt-Delete button to get the sun and the calendar speaking the same language again. And that big reset? It laid the groundwork for the calendar system we pretty much recognize today. The new calendar kicked off fresh on January 1st, 45 BC. The months were standardized to the lengths we know, 30 or 31 days. And most importantly, Caesar introduced the brilliant concept of a leap year, adding 1 extra day every 4 years to stop the calendar from drifting away from the sun. Now, don't get me wrong, Caesar's calendar was a huge improvement. I mean, it was a triumph of order over all that chaos. But there was a flaw. A tiny, almost impossible to notice mathematical error was baked right into its core. Just look at these numbers. They're so close. The Julian calendar worked on the idea that a year is exactly 365.25 days long. The actual time it takes the Earth to orbit the sun, the tropical year, is just a tiny bit shorter. We're talking a minuscule difference. But here's the thing, it's not 0, and that's what matters. And that tiny difference, that's the ticking clock at the heart of the Julian calendar. Every single year, it overshot the true solar year by about 11 minutes. Now, you wouldn't notice that in your lifetime, right? But over hundreds of years? Oh yeah. Those minutes start to add up. They add up into hours, and eventually they add up into days. And even with a better system, you still have to deal with human error. The priests in Rome completely misunderstood the new every 4th year rule. Instead, they started adding a leap day every 3 years, for 36 years. It took Emperor Augustus to finally realize what was happening, and he had to pause all leap years for more than a decade just to fix their mistake and get things back on track. So, okay, once they finally ironed out those early kinks, how did that little 11-minute error start to play out over, say, the next 1,500 years? Well, the drift was slow, but it was absolutely relentless. After about 128 years, the calendar was off by one full day. Fast forward to the 1500s, and that accumulated error means the Julian calendar is now 10 days out of sync with the seasons. So things like the first day of spring were happening 10 days before the calendar said they should. Big problem. This growing problem is what led to the next big fix. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII stepped in and introduced a major reform. To get the clock back in sync, he did something wild. He just declared that the day after October 4th would be October 15th. Just like that, 10 days vanished from history. Poof. He also brought in a much smarter leap year rule, which is actually the one most of the world uses today. But as you can imagine, changing something as basic as the date isn't exactly easy. While all the Catholic countries jumped on board with the new Gregorian calendar right away, Protestant and Orthodox nations resisted for centuries. So you had this weird period where two different dates were being used across Europe at the same time, which, as you can imagine, created total chaos for things like trade and communication. And that brings us all the way to today, because the Julian calendar isn't just some dusty old artifact from a history book, its legacy is very much alive. A lot of Eastern Orthodox churches still use it to figure out their religious holidays. That's why, for example, Orthodox Christmas falls on January 7th. It's not a different day for them. That is December 25th on their Julian calendar. It's just that their calendar is now 13 days behind ours. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The Gregorian calendar we all use today is incredibly accurate. I mean, it's only off by one day every 3,300 years. But it's still not perfect. The whole story of the calendar is really the story of humanity's unending quest for more and more precision, a race against time that, you have to figure, probably isn't over yet.